Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Sam Page can't join us today. He's going to be back next week. Sam's becoming quite the busy guy, and he's got some career stuff going on. So we'll be missing him for this week, but we'll be looking forward to getting him back next week. And I have a special guest joining me today. His name is Vinnie Potestivo. And Vinnie, I got to tell you, Sam is actually our pianist in residence. Every once in a while, we get a little piano action in the background. So you kind of missed something kind of cool. He's very
Sam,
good.
I'm sorry that you're not. I'm sorry I'm missing out on this.
Yeah.
I want a rain chat. I'm excited to be here.
Okay.
I'm committed to being here. I gotta get it on the Sam.
I'm trying to
tinkling on the ivories, you know.
Right. Well, I picked up a keyboard recently myself after staying away from one for 50 years and trying to reteach myself how to do it again.
Did you read music? Did you read music already? Can you?
Oh yeah. Well, I took piano lessons when I was a kid for 7 years, something like that. And then
that hasn't changed. All the new words in the language, right? But the notes haven't changed.
Yeah, the way that people describe it, I don't even understand what some of the musicians say today. I have no idea what they're talking about.
I mean, now it's all about ownership rights, if anything, and usage rights, right? Yeah. You actually have some rights now versus just a couple of years ago, let alone 20 plus years ago, when you own nothing that you created as a creator. And it's nice. It's a nice world we live in now. It's a big
improvement. Well, it is. But from my perspective, the only ownership I'm interested in is, can I make the notes play what I want them to play?
Yeah.
If I can do that, I mean, after 50 years of being away from it, I'm actually surprised. I mean, I'm in my fourth month playing with it. My fifth month, actually. No, 6th month. That's right, because Christmas was 6 months ago. My brother gave it to me for Christmas. And I was kind of surprised how easily it came back. But some of it is still not quite there. Like, you tell the fingers do this and they don't do that. It's a little bit disconcerting.
It doesn't quite go the stretch isn't quite as far as it used to.
Well, actually, it stretches too far.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's I'll try to play like an octave.
All right,
like
Incredible Hulk.
9. It's like, no, shorten that up. Hold on.
That's funny.
That's all good. It's fun. So
anyway, things they don't teach you.
We gotta tell people a little bit about Vinnie. This guy, he's had quite a career. He's a former MTV exec, and he was involved in many of MTV's golden years. He has created his own podcast, coincidentally called I Have a Podcast. Very creative. I like that.
Thank you.
He has worked with the likes of Mandy Moore, Suchin Pak, Christina Milan, TJ Lavin, Vanessa Lachey. I mean, he's worked with a bunch of people who are name personalities, and really he played a role in helping them become name personalities. So this is a guy who understands what it takes for people to become the better part of what they want to be.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a great way to see that. Oh, I appreciate that. The vision on how you see what I've done. But yeah, I love if that's truly what I get to say that I do, then I would die happy, because getting to bring out the best in people, whether that's called talent development, whatever title you want to call it.
What do you call it?
I call it media. So because of this world we live in, I call it media advisory and talent development. Like those two are different worlds for me.
Okay.
I can talk about monetizing your brand in talent development and in media development, where I'm more prone to talk about I'm less prone to talk about repurposing content and added marketing and added advertising strategies at the end. And I'm more prone to talk about pre-purposing content and understanding how we plan to market it and advertise afterwards, so that we can produce into those channels, as opposed to what I think a lot of modern creators are doing now, which is sort of like seeking approval, seeking cooperation with.
Well, that's been going on for decades. I mean, there's nothing new going on there.
Yeah, and that's just like there's in music, in TV, and like the sort of wild west of media that I was exposed to in the late 90s. You pitch the source, not the story. There's a lot of people going around pitching a podcast episodes, but they aren't consistently saying, I'm sitting down with these, here are the next 10 episodes that I'm about to sit down with as a source. What's one question I can ask them that you would be interested in learning about? Just identifying themselves as a source. I think we're at the point now where we're still trying to talk influencers into being creators and podcasters into being creators, and podcasters are not influencers and influencers are not podcasters, but we are all creators of some point, of some sort. And
well, I think we're all influencers too. I mean, some of us may not fall. I certainly don't necessarily fall into the category of influencer. I don't have.
Well, maybe good influence or bad influence, but either way.
Well, there's that too. Yeah, but I mean, all of us, even those of us who have smaller audiences. I mean, I don't remember what the latest number is. The last I saw was like 135 was the average audience size for a podcast. Now I'm doing better than that, but that's where there are 2 million podcasts out there.
Yeah, that's
and
a lot.
so and yet those 135 following that particular podcaster, that person is influencing them. It's just not influencing on the big level, like, oh, he's an influencer. But he's still
I think so. I mean, that's 5 times the size of the classes that I was in when I was learning, in education and in school. And I think of class size a lot in terms of like understanding audiences. And then I think of school sizes and audiences in terms of thinking about communities. But I think that 130, I think that. So I didn't think I was going to say this, but I created something called the Verified Podcast Exchange because I saw a gap in the marketplace between podcasters and influencers. Brands are allowed to write checks to influencers. That's like language has been established. The SOPs have been understood. The KPIs, the indicators to success have been identified. So now it's okay for brands to write checks to influencers.
Well, plus, if you have acronyms, that means you've got something going for you.
Yeah, right. Right. Podcasters, I have to say 130 dedicated downloads per episode to me sounds like a really, really a solid core group of people pulling information from you versus the 90,000 likes that you got on TikTok on that one video sometime, in 2020, 2021, when TikTok was giving those away. One out of 50, 1 out of 100, accounts got, I'm not poo-pooing. I'm not saying anything bad about TikTok creators at all, but the audience strength, I don't think that big business or medium-sized businesses have yet to impact podcasting and infiltrate our audiences the way that you can on social media because of the Facebook platforms, Instagram, because of the platforms and the way that advertising is sold and the way that that sort of business works. So
that has to shift at some point. But you're right. It's almost kind of like we're in the early phases. So
we really are. People who are like, "Oh, it's too late. It's a saturated market." Like, no, it's a growing market. So even if it's saturated, we ain't going to be underwater for much longer. There is just platform after platform, and then these platforms have like 5 surfaces inside the platform, and I think that it's exciting time to be in podcasting. Everyone knows what broadcast television is. The idea of sending out a wide, signal. Podcasting is narrowcasting, so we're sending a much more narrow signal out there. I think the future of podcasting actually lives in broadcasting.
Really? That's interesting.
I worked at MTV back when we used to play music videos. I know what it's like to be in the house when the TV is on and not have to watch TV to know what's on TV. And I'll tell you what, podcasts, there's like it's like 2 dudes and a microphone. The cameras don't even change. You know what I mean? And I think and there are some video podcasts that do have multiple cameras, and there is some production detail that's put into that. I think you need that if you're going to be in this video space. I think that as podcasters, we think that the viewer gives us like a sort of like oh, it's okay, they're a podcast. They don't have to have B-roll and professional footage. And I mean, we're using, I love StreamYard. This is one of my favorite platforms to be able to stream on, just record on or multicast on. I love the restream ability on this platform as well. But it becomes about the usage and the reusage to it all. So it's cool.
Well, you used a term toward the beginning here that I thought was really interesting, and you kind of used it in juxtaposition to a term that marketers know, repurposing. You called it pre-purposing. What is
yeah.
pre-purposing to you?
Oh yeah. So in tele so where I come from in the world of TV,
Woohoo!
back in the 90s, TRL man, we knew that we had a 30-second advertising spot that we had to have content for. We
Mhm.
didn't look around and say, "Hey, what do we got? And what can we throw into that 30-second slot?" We knew
Right.
that 30-second slot was there a month and a half ago. We started planning for that 30-second slot well before we even went into production, maybe on like our spring break shows. So now I know that there are a couple of advertising needs that we have need a need for content for, and I also have a blitz of programming like spring break, for example, coming up. So what I'm going to do is make sure that those needs are baked into the actual production of the series, so that I don't need to go out and reshoot something, or I don't have to go back and repurpose something that wasn't intended to be that 30-second spot. I can create it with that 30-second spot in mind. What does that look like, you might ask? A format, a segment. Think about late night talk shows. Think about here's pre-purposing at its best. Every single late night talk show right now, Jimmy, James, even throw Ellen in there. These
Mhm.
are people who have to create short segments because that they're going to be lifted and distributed on social media platforms.
Right.
Some of them have to be fast-paced segments because, multiple questions and sort of because they're going to be chopped down even tighter for TikTok and for even shorter pieces of content. And these are needs that they know they have. And they create these segments knowing how they're going to distribute them afterwards, which is why they don't play games like they don't play TikTok. I mean, tic-tac-toe, a game that's already been played that they don't own. They go out and create a game that's never been played before, so they can own that IP, like Carpool Karaoke, for example, and then sell that IP out of the show and turn it into its own vehicle, its own IP, and its own television show. And I can point to Ellen and I can point to Jimmy Fallon. I could literally just go down the line and say, see how the segment turns into the show, or this segment leads into the special. It's by design. And if you look at the networks,
That's interesting.
yeah, it's by design. And also the major networks have most major networks have a news division to them. The
Sure.
news division is drooling, clamoring, waiting for the Tonight Show to give them their 2 to 5 minute segment clips so that they can disperse them and put them into they know there's a need for them, and they know how they're going to be made. It's not like they're turning around afterwards and saying, well, what do we have, and what's the best way to use, and how can we repurpose this, and what can we do with it now, and how, which seems to be a very reactive conversation. And if you really plan for that, it makes, do you know what it does? It gets rid of your content. It gets rid of the need for like a heavy content strategy where I have to tell you about what to talk about once a day or a week or so that it's baked into who you are, and that when you're ready to talk, you're ready to create, and you don't have to spend the time editing or finessing or over strategizing or over analyzing the message. And if you spend a little bit more time in the beginning the beginning piece of it, where you can be really purposeful instead of planning to repurpose it, plan to pre-purpose it, that gives you, a final product at the end line when everybody else is just starting to figure out what to do with it. And it's a really strong way to approach, I think, talent development and media development as well,
I,
because
I
you
have to
need it.
tell you, I'm sitting. I totally get what you're saying. I
Mhm.
appreciate it. I can see the value of it. I can see how it fits in beautifully with the way marketing is working today, particularly through social media, because that's pretty much dominating the landscape. But there's also, I mean, well, you can tell from my hair, like, I've been around for a bit.
I'm not that
I'm
far
kind of
off.
old.
Come on,
I'm
give me
kind.
some credit here. I got him.
I'm kind of old school about this. There's a piece of me that says, yeah, but what about a guy like me? I don't really want to have to plan out my conversation that way.
Yeah,
I'm much too impromptu.
yeah.
I don't want to have to figure in, well, how do I turn this into something that can be used in a 30-second TikTok? I don't want to think that way when I'm doing a
Yeah.
podcast.
So what I would say is to think about it in a segment, though. So if you were to think of, maybe if you were to gamify a way that you ask questions,
Mhm.
and know that, okay, Vin, we're gonna do a speed round. I have 5 questions. It's or word association or any type of fun sort of like a creative brand association. I'm going to say a brand, you say a color. I'm going to say a flavor.
Like the thing that James Lipton used to do at the end of Inside the Actors Studio.
So here you're picking up on a great segment, because those are the things that are quickly and easily lifted, self-contained. I don't need to explain what this is. This is just 30-second quick fire with Walt and Vinnie, go. And you're building that into this. So maybe we would do that as like in between, if we had topics that we were talking about, maybe you can use it, as like a little social palate cleanse. All right, now I'm going to do a quick fire question to understand what we just learned, and then we're going to move on. All right, here's my it could be something like that, where I'm not saying you have to I don't want you to chop up your show and feel like you have to do the Tonight Show. Part of the beautiful thing.
No, I don't want to do the Tonight. Well, I mean, it's fun to be on the Tonight Show. I'm sure. I mean, you're talking to this audience, and all. I'm sure that must be great. But I don't want to be the Tonight Show.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, but here's the thing: if you look at the Tonight Show, in the beginning, he doesn't start off by saying, "This is welcome to a new episode of the Tonight Show. Our special guests are so." That comes well after the news. The value of that hour has already been dedicated. So if you look at the format of that show, like for podcasting, for example, instead of starting the podcast and saying, actually some people will do the interview here, and then we'll go back and we'll record the intro so that we can sort of give it more purpose out of the gate. So we're saying, like, what you're about to listen to, you're going to learn X, Y, and Z, so that you have a little bit more of an understanding of what to expect. And if you know what to expect, then more likely than not, you're going to stick around and listen to the episode that I've created with the intent of getting what I've told you can expect out of this episode. If not, then, I question about, like, listenership and listen through. And like, I don't have a podcast that's even put out weekly, to be really honest, because my podcast is not about what people are doing. I don't know how to say that. And my podcast is more about like how I did what I did, and how we did what we did, and how we're still doing it. I don't need to have that conversation. I don't need to have that conversation all the time, because I get to have that conversation with you. And
which is good.
It fills the space for me.
Yeah.
And that's by intention how I'm doing it.
I think about, for instance, the television show that won all the Emmys, the Ted Lasso, the Apple TV show, right? Which basically broke all the rules about how you put a situation comedy together.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it broke all of them. They shopped that one. I saw an interview. I was just watching this, like, before we did the show today. I was watching a clip on YouTube of the guys, Jason and the others, being interviewed about how the show got started and so forth. And they shopped it all over Hollywood. They shopped it in New York. They shopped it everywhere. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with it. Everybody said, "Yeah, okay, good luck with that one." Yeah.
Yeah, right. And what was it? What was it that made it work? I don't know the story as well.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what my take is on it.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
First of all, when I watched the first, I watched the first 3 episodes because one of my co-hosts recommended it, and it's somebody I really trust. And when she recommends something, I say, okay, I'm going to check it out.
Yeah.
I checked those first 3 episodes are painful to watch. They are truly painful. They hurt because the characters are so stereotypical. They're so boxy. They're so unbelievable. That's like, oh God, am I watching?
Yeah, the suspension of disbelief is like, come on, this would never possibly.
It's more like suspension of belief is what it really is. But then a couple of the main characters changed. Like, they changed their behavior pattern, and for brief moments started behaving like real people. And it gets your attention. That's the way I felt about it anyway, that these people all of a sudden were being real. And it's like, wait a minute, what just happened here? And I liked them. I liked them a lot.
Yeah.
And then what I liked even more, we now, this show was originally about law of attraction, and so it has become sort of a platform talking about that, but it really has kind of branched out beyond that. But that's where the roots of it come from. Their roots was they wanted to focus on something that we very much believe in a lot, which is positivity, focusing on positive intention, focusing on what you like rather than what you don't like, and so on and so forth. They wanted to make that the vehicle for the show. That was like a very intentional part of what they were doing. And that was the part that Hollywood rejected. Yeah. Because that's what Hollywood always rejects. Hollywood wants what is conflict. They want the conflict. They want the give and not the give and take. They want the push and pull. They want the fighting. They want they want the high contrast stuff. And Ted Lasso wasn't going to give it to them. They said, well, we're not going to put millions of dollars behind that. Are you kidding? No one's going to watch it. And it turned out people did watch it. They watched it by the millions. They continue to watch it. They keep replaying it over and over and over again. So to me, that is a huge signal that says something that I've always believed. Hollywood doesn't have a freaking clue. Hollywood is not clued in to what is actually driving real people.
That's funny. I'll say this. I don't know where I was taught this, learned this in television, but and it came up a lot at Bravo specifically. But when there's discord in politics, you will see a kinder, more optimistic storylines and character in reality television. And when when everything is great, with the liberal news and in politics, then that's where we turn up the volume, and that's where the housewives are. That older version that we know them about. So it's interesting to think of the time, because I think Ted Lasso came out like end of 2020. I think
just before the pandemic hit.
So a really interesting
it's a pandemic
time.
show, really.
Yeah, it's and a change of politics too. It's a really interesting time for a show with that heap of optimism built into it, as intrinsically as with the level of humanity that they put into it. But I love that you bring up that this show is about the law of attraction, because it isn't this proof. It didn't they literally put out like the biggest, most positive vibes ever, and didn't they break every rule that you're not supposed to do in media, and have become the sweetheart of media, and it's changed all of their careers, and it's put a really positive story and vibes and vocabulary into the ethos, and that's super cool.
It actually ruined my podcast. To be perfectly honest. It ruined it because I can't really say that. The main reason I created the podcast was because in 2012 I was in desperate straits. I was financially just devastated. I couldn't figure out how to climb out of it. I kind of heard about the law of attraction, didn't really know what it was. So I figured the only thing I can afford to do is to start a podcast to bring experts on to teach me how this stuff works. And that was the impetus behind the show. It later became something that I love doing, and so that's why I've been doing it ever since then. But
you became a believer.
I became a believer. But here's the part that kind of ruined it for me. I'm saying this tongue in cheek. What ruined it is that it turns out that this thing that I thought was going to be really controversial, because nobody was going to accept this. I mean, this is this law of attraction bullshit. No one's going to buy into that, right? Everybody on the show loves it. I get maybe 1 out of 25 guests who will give me any pushback at all on it. It's like, what happened here?
What happened to you? What were you putting out, by the way, that wasn't coming back to you the way
apparently
that you thought?
Right? I don't know.
I love it though. I love this. This is the law of attraction. Literally one of my favorite laws that that are in this space. I, as a casting director of 20 plus years in television, I never went out trying to find what I was like. I was like the person. Oftentimes I worked, like most of the times I worked in an awesome department with multiple senior executives, but every once in a while, like, it would be my job to go out and find, my next on the line on this guy, and my next on the line on this woman. And even with that much pressure, I never took that on myself to go out and find the needle in the haystack. I brought the law of attraction with me everywhere. I said, I was the guy in the room from MTV. Everyone knew. My MO was, I'm the dude that hires all the talent on MTV. If you know anyone who wants to host,
that's a tough sales pitch, right?
Yeah, right. Well, here's the thing. I had to work on access. So I, instead of transactionally using it with casting, I used those opportunities to create real relationships. So I never was like, hey, do you know so and so? I was always like, hey, I'm casting this project. If you know anyone, send them that. I never would ask somebody for a lead, because
it was more modern marketing is what that really is.
It's and also I called it modern media marketing. That's funny you say that.
Well, there you go.
But because the truth of the matter is that I want you to discover them. Because if you discover them, the story changes now. Oh, I called up Vinnie at MTV. He said he was trying to get this comedian. Now I got a guy. Now I got a guy over here and I got a guy over here. And these people will look out for me. And I did not realize this, but they will look out and have looked out for me my entire career. It's this whole like web of people that, we've leveraged opportunities, and that's why we work with our close friends in this industry. To be honest, more so than like you hope your close friends are talented. But the truth of the matter is you sure do end up working with your close friends one way or another in this industry.
One way or the other,
yeah. because we know how to work with people, because I think creatives know how to work with each other. We know, what it means, and at this stage of the game, sort of what to expect. And for me, I felt like casting was an awesome entry into. I mean, I wanted to help people. I wanted to empower people. I wanted to meet people. I wanted to travel. Everything I got to do before social media, because when social media came, no more traveling.
Yeah,
everybody is a casting director. Everyone's a creator. So like the budgets changed quickly.
Yes,
when those iPhones and Sam's smartphones came out. But you know what? It was really cool for me as a self-taught creative who wired VCRs together as a 19-year-old who was who was fixing scanners and printers at MTV just as much as show notes and talent one sheets and stuff like that. It's cool now to be in this era where technology and creativity are so hand in hand, and that there's hundreds of millions more people who now identify as creators who didn't take my path, who didn't go through traditional TV, all they did was get a phone that has a camera and some editing software, built into it. And they suddenly, and that's why I like to talk about pre-purposing. This is why I like to talk about development and some of the stuff that happens at the beginning stages of content. Otherwise, it's a very expensive process, emotionally, physically, financially. It's a very, emotionally, especially.
Yes.
Tolling,
Well, so you basically live in a bigger space than you lived in before.
And every day there's like a new. So by the way, I worked in TV when there was like 20 networks, no big deal. And maybe there was like 50 by the time it was like 2017, including the variations thereof. Now there's thousands.
Yeah.
There's if you go on Samsung TV, there are dedicated channels to shows. Like shows that I cast to shows, like there's a whole it's just 24 streaming of that. I'm like, there's so much content that we had no clue. So you talk about how many 8 billion people, 7 billion people on this world, and I think there's like 1 billion downloads, podcast download, or there's billion. It's not linear. This is not 7. This is not immediate downloads, and over time, like what we're doing is just. It's cool. It's cool time now to be a creator, to create content and to get to own it because of what's coming and what's coming.
Well, it's also kind of Wild West too, in the sense that people don't really know what to make of this new thing. I mean, I don't think anybody really knows what to make of it just yet, to be perfectly honest. And I look at, like you mentioned, the huge numbers of downloads, billions of downloads. I didn't even know about this until like a month ago, but I learned that the most popular genre on YouTube is kids stuff. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And once it was explained, it made total sense. Of course, the parents want to give them the YouTube so they can just go off and do their thing. They can be entertained, and the kids are playing the same thing over and over and over again. So the views are just going up, 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 up. I get it. But wow, what a shift that is.
Funny.
A shift that we haven't even seen the ramifications of it yet, because the kids haven't grown up yet.
Yeah, I'm lucky to have worked on a program that was bought by YouTube Kids called Kid Correspondent. It's news for kids by kids. I think what you described is definitely part of the culture for sure. That's definitely contributing to it. But they watch much more than we ever did on those smaller screens. Mostly because because we had battery issues. We're scarred, I'm like, don't watch YouTube on my iPhone. You're use up all my minutes.
Use the battery, right?
So we know too much, that they don't, they God bless them. And, but I'll tell you something. It's not just like it's not the long nature of what they're watching. They're really listening. I don't
Mm,
know if
yes.
my generation, Gen X, necessarily, like I wouldn't say like we were like they, maybe if we listened, then that's nice, but we just didn't do enough after listening. I'll say it that way.
But that's
And
been true for generation after generation. You got
yeah,
nothing
but
new
these
there.
kids have buttons now. We didn't
Yeah.
watch TV that said subscribe. Like there's buttons built into this path now. I can go on a little rant about video gaming. And I was a gamer as a kid, and it was video gaming that got me into computers. And the thing I loved about creating on a computer was that I can make my space infinitely larger than if I
Mm,
was creating on a piece of paper
sure.
or in a notebook. And also, it was really difficult for my brothers and sisters to ruin what I'm creating in my computer unless they unplug it. It's not like they can pour water on it or as we were an active household. I'll just say it that
Apparently,
way.
yes, I can tell.
Yeah, isn't that like everyone's childhood like that? No, just me. And I wouldn't have it any other way. And I got to make all their dreams come true as like an older brother, and that's literally what I did when I got to MTV. I was like, if I'm the guy in the room that's going to get to pick the people who come in. At first I wanted the kindest, nicest people because I got bullied, and I
Mm.
never liked being surrounded by people who made me feel less than, not smart enough, or not
Well, who
this enough
does? I
or
mean,
that
really.
enough. And then like 5 years into my MTV dig, I was like, these people are like turning into like real celebrities. Like they're like Mandy Moore is like 17, but she's like fighting for my right to marry the man that I want to be able. Like this is like you're showing up in like a. I
Yeah.
didn't think we had this type of power. Television had the power for youth culture. That's the thing. That's the timing was great on. Was
Yeah.
the youth,
Well, we
the
we knew that
eyeballs
it's
on
been around for
television.
years, right? Television power has been
Oh
obvious for,
yeah,
like, decades now, since basically since the golden age. But you're right, now that it's becoming more, what, democratized? I'm not sure what to call it.
yeah.
Once it has
Decentralized. Yeah,
decentralized, yeah, once it's reached this stage, we're now entering territory we have never been before.
yeah. There these micro audiences aren't even like full audiences, and we're trying to create communities
Mhm.
out of I think the way to build a community is when you take two audiences and merge them over a shared like belief or system. So
Interesting.
it's the idea of Coachella is a community generator, because you're taking artists who aren't promoting their specific album, but they're able to bring their audiences into Coachella, or even like Fish or the Grateful Dead playing, in Madison Square Garden at
Mhm.
New Year's Eve. It's about coming together for New Year's Eve and experiencing music. That's going to bring more of a community together than the Fish audience, for
Mm, mhm,
example. But yeah, I
mhm,
think that's where the money is, because that's where the culture is. That's where the community is where the culture is. It's where all the financial conversations, all the I like what businesses are we supporting, what businesses are we not supporting. This is like a big era of business development and even talent development that we have not yet tapped into.
Oh, it's barely
um
even started. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who has a really good handle on how you do
yeah,
this yet.
yeah.
I mean, maybe Joe Rogan is about the only one that I can think of, but beyond that, who else knows what we're really doing here? There are people who have, millions of followers. Okay, so really psyched. I got a great business model. I'm building my empire and so forth. But I'll bet you even they don't really know what it is that got them there in the first place. I mean, they could tell their story. They could
Yeah.
tell you what happened at ABC, but could they explain it?
Well, they'll
I
tell you
doubt
what
it.
everyone else has told them.
Yeah,
I
right.
know that for sure.
Exactly.
No, I love these when I get on. Everyone's like, "Oh, he's had such a successful." I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, if you even knew like all the fails that I've had, like I appreciate that we're here to talk about the successes, but like I've but I got paid. Luckily, I got paid. I literally got paid to fail at MTV. Like there was
That's
like
huge.
work at a company that is not is the creative company that allows you
Mhm.
as a creative to fail. But that means that I have to have 16 projects going at any given time, 16 to
Mm,
20 projects at any given time, so that I
playing the
can
odds.
fail. So the other
Yeah.
15 are successful. Like just, I don't want you to think it's like, oh, I failed for the month of January. No, no. It's like one, you only failed a little bit.
No, I
Just a
mean,
little bit.
this has actually been an ongoing point that comes up in interview after interview, that people who experience whatever kind of success they experience in their lives, and usually the people who are on the show are people who've experienced various kinds of success, they all have the same story to tell. They had failure, 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 success, failure, failure, failure,
Oh yeah.
failure, 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 success. I mean, it's like far more failures than success. And the only really real difference that I've been able to find between those who are obviously successful and those who feel like they aren't there is that the ones who are obviously successful are simply not afraid to fail. They'll just
Oh
keep
yeah.
failing.
Yeah. Well, that's because that's where you win. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not even really about winning, by the way. It's really about failing.
And it isn't even
kind of
about
becomes
failing because they
fun.
don't think about it. They don't think of it as failing.
No,
I
it's
mean,
kind
when
of
you
like
failed on UTV MTV,
yeah.
did you actually think you failed?
No,
I mean, seriously, that was you got paid to
I
do
can tell
something that
you.
didn't work.
Yeah,
Okay, go to the next one. Who cares?
yeah. No, it's I'm in my head about like those things that yeah you it's like I hate to say it's only cable, and I know there are other like bigger life decision makers and decisions to be made that are out there. So I would sort of keep that in check with whatever I was working on. But those failures were someone else's successes, I'll tell you that. Put it that way. That's good though. I like that. Like, but I had safety in that. I had safety in knowing that
Talk
if
about
if
that.
I failed, then it meant that maybe we were bringing on another, because we were a department of two when the talent development department created, and our next hire was a female, and then I can see how as we added to our group of talent executives and development executives and casting directors and sort of talent network, how conscious we were for the conversations of representation, but unfortunately not unfortunately for the purposes of like, oh, well, I wouldn't say unfortunate, I would say because we wanted to understand, and that was for I'm a who guy, not a how guy, so I'm always about who can I work with to help me figure this out. I don't want, like you said earlier, I don't want to be a late night talk show host. Trust me. I know all those people. If I really wanted that, I would, but I love owning my content. I'm terrified about some of the things in television that those people have to go through. And I really I don't want that type of schedule or
Give us a taste of that, just so people know.
or demand. Well, I mean, I really, my mental health is, now it's not, we talk about mental health a lot now in media, but for years, I mean, the things we see, the things I've heard, the things I've been pitched, the things that I know that are out there that are real. It's like, here's like a weird thing, for example, like everyone loves Extreme Makeover Home Edition, right? It's a beautiful show, and a very needing family gets, a whole house renovation.
Sure.
You also have to know that if you're in casting on that show, you also met probably 15 other families very similar to that one, all of whom also have devastating stories. That's a very tolling process.
Yeah, sure.
To dive deep into, and we I don't want to speak in general, but like, I'll say this: most reality unscripted casting people do this because we genuinely care. It's not easy getting people cast on. It's easy getting good-looking people cast on dating shows. I'll say that. You know what I mean? So like, if you want to find fun people, because dating shows are not relationship shows. Dating shows, it's like you got to go on a date. I'm not asking you to get married, although there are those shows also. But I'll tell you what, casting those shows are tough. I've cast so many shows where, oh my gosh, I'll tell you one. It's called, I don't want to say the name, but the idea was, I think it was called Baby Borrowers. It was a UK format.
Baby Borrowers.
Yeah, the idea is that there's a couple that doesn't have children. They got married, and then something changed. And now one of them thinks that maybe they do want to be parents, and they're trying to figure out if being parents are right for them because something changed internally or external. And in the series, I would find those two people, and then I would find the parents of a toddler, of an infant, of a teenager, and then of a senior. And then over 2 weeks, we had this couple every 3 days. First it was the infant, then it was the toddler, then it was the teenager. So they can experience, sort of being but finding couples that were questioning if they should or shouldn't be parents. I'm like now an active participant in their relationship conversations about their life.
Yeah.
You know, um,
Well,
so you have to be
besides
mindful.
that, there's also another piece to it, and maybe you can explain this part to me
Yeah,
because
tell
I
me.
don't really get this. I kind of get it because I understand this is what sells advertising, but there are so many of these creators of so-called reality TV shows, some of which I have trouble calling real,
Mm,
but nevertheless, that's another topic. They're creators of these reality TV shows, and I swear to God, they're trying to create the most dysfunctional setup they can possibly set up.
yeah.
Like how can we create something that no one in their right mind would ever even consider doing because we know that's going to get lots of views?
Yeah.
Am I like missing something here? Isn't that what they're doing?
It depends on the network you're watching for sure. There's heightened escapism for sure, and I think Bravo does a great job at, like, they have a show where they take some of their star housewives and they sent them on a vacation, and you sort of seeing them in unique
Mm,
places. I think whenever you exacerbate a situation, it's drop them in a new place, make them eat new food, have new conversations, new language. There's any type of sort of social barrier. Um, but I would say this: I worked in mostly ensemble series. Like, a lot of my
mhm,
shows that I worked on, like the Osbournes and Newlywed, like there were Laguna Beach and The Hill, like there were the Housewives of New Jersey. Even they're about, people. There's a format to them, and the format's in the story engine. The format's in the story. The story engine for Housewives of New Jersey, originally at least, is Caroline Manzo, the matriarch of her family, has a couple of smaller businesses. There's some sisters. So you have sister rivalry, you have sibling rivalry, you have family rivalry. So you can always sort of pull from, there's going to be some type of story. She's got kids. There's always going to be some type of parenting, opportunity. So these are story engines. When you get into the very sort of like right now on Netflix, on Hulu, there's a lot of like highly produced reality TV where you're
mm.
putting them in extreme situations. That's similar to like maybe like what people used to do in the early 2000s, where they would on Real World. There was this rumor. I promise you, I never saw this happen, but where they would like, there wouldn't be anything to drink except for alcohol. They would remove like sort of
Oh,
like the soda
jeez.
and all that stuff, and then after a while, and then the food is gone, and then so I know that there are those tactics that were put up, and there are now network deals and showrunners and there are people put in place to make sure that no one is jeopardizing the mental health of cast, the physical well-being of cast, by doing that. But that I kind of roll my eyes a little bit and I'm pouty because I think that's low-hanging fruit. And
Mm.
if you can orchestrate a train crash and no one gets hurt, then yeah, you're going to make the news. And that's what these
True.
producers are willing to do, to not just get their show seen and make sure that the show is talked about at the level that shows get talked about now, because of how competitive airspace is.
And yet
Like,
on some level, I mean, you mentioned you worked on Ozzy Osbourne.
yeah,
To me, Ozzy is actually an example of not that far out, like where you were just describing the overproduced ones. Yeah, those are the ones that are really far out. But Ozzy himself he's actually a fairly messed up guy.
yeah,
And he's basically being presented to the world as the messed up guy that he is. And his wife, I don't know how she puts up with him, but I give her a lot of credit. But anyway, she's like the juxtaposition, creating a little world of sanity around Ozzy, and that's
yeah.
the show every week.
It really is. And by the way, so one of the sort of the biggest fail when it comes to the Osbournes is, I think originally that show was supposed to be a cooking show.
Is that right?
Yeah, because Ozzy he only sat in the kitchen. He just watched. At that point, there was a show on BBC called Two Fat Ladies. That was a cooking show.
I'll take your word for it. I
I
don't know.
did. I know it's. I hate the name. I hate bringing this story up in this like this world of. But I'm sticking to it. By the way, it's the English's fault. The Englishman. But there was this cooking show, and by the way, think about it. Like all of the action kind of happens in the kitchen anyway. We had this cool data point from Cribs that told us that one of the highlights, one of the format beats to Cribs, was what's in the fridge. Like, that was actually something that the audience would wait to watch the episode
Really?
until that moment happened. They wanted to know what was in the fridge. And when that data point came back, then then all of a sudden it doesn't happen at the top of Act B. It happens at the end of Act B. So you watch, at least 14 minutes of content before flipping over. And then
yeah, you have to kind of keep them going.
Yeah.
Okay, show it, and time to show the commercial.
Show it, and then we know that commercial spot right after the end of B is going to be hot, especially if it's something that could theoretically be in your refrigerator. And so there's a lot of that sort of cooperation that works. But that's what I mean by pre-purpose, not repurpose. Like you make these opportunities happen for you instead of hoping that cosmically, something happens. And this is how I've worked the law of attraction to not be about the specific episodes or the specific tiny opportunities, but more so about staying connected to me for all the opportunities I can bring in. And in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was reality TV. And 10 years ago, it was social media and the digital media age. And 5 years ago, I doubled down on podcasting. It was 2006 where I turned my first podcast into a TV show. Wow. But 5 years ago, I love that you can own it. And I believe that small businesses can make a big change. I know that big
business. Talk about how that can actually happen.
Sure. So how we employ each other, how we charge each other, the services that we perform for each other, the way that we have an ability to interact with each other as people versus some of the larger companies and the larger brands that have different jobs and different goals. Like I wouldn't want them to have necessarily the same goals that we can accomplish being one-on-one and being person on person. We're not a voice of representation. We're a person of representation, and that you have a relationship with me as opposed to you don't have a relationship with the voice of, representation. So, and small business owners owning this, who own podcasts. I mean, this is a small, medium-sized business game. This big media is just now getting into podcasting, but the big companies are not getting into podcasting just yet.
I can't even imagine. I'm trying to imagine how that actually plays out. I mean, we know Spotify, they bought Joe Rogan.
Think about networks, like the too. McDonald's network, the Pfizer network, the Walgreens network of podcasts. Imagine if I can shop podcasts aisles the same way I can shop beauty, for example. Or food at ShopRite, or wherever your grocery store du jour is.
Actually, that kind of scares me a little bit because I think about the way the programming section, where you have all the different shows on your cable. Because to me, that's like the worst menu system in the world. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's what we're facing for the rest of our lives. I'm not sure I can handle
I can talk to my thought on that is that we're getting away from the need to we want to subscribe to our content. We don't want to have to search for our content. I think that podcasters, look, RSS has been around for a while. RSS is kind of a blog thing, and I don't want to get too technical, but
just so people know what you're talking about, RSS is actually that's the piece of technology that enables a podcast to get out there and be a podcast.
Yeah, that's like the address that your files live at, and then Apple basically rings your doorbell and says, "Ding dong, got anything new?" And then you say, "Yeah, I got a new episode." And that's why if you don't post new episodes frequently, Apple stops hitting your bell. So it might take a little bit longer because they spend less money ringing your bell to see what's new. But that's a very active technology, RSS. Like those podcast directories spend money and energy pinging your. So in this future world of content and it's already happening on Apple TV and some of the OTT ways that we're consuming content now, where we're subscribing to series that we don't even know if it aired on cable or if it's a Netflix show, or we don't even know where it came from. We just know, or when it even airs, we just know where to get it. I think that's the future of, I remember the days when I would watch the TV Guide. Remember watching the TV Guide channel?
Yes, I remember.
It's like you would watch it. Wait, here comes the tease. Oh, I missed it. I gotta wait 7 more minutes. And you think they would be like speed that up a little bit? They slowed it down and then they put a TV show on the top.
Right.
Here's 5 tips about this movie, and your 7:30. Like mashed potatoes.
The scariest part to me is that there were people like you who were watching it. That terrified me.
I would watch that. Dave Holmes. He was one of the VJs on MTV. Chris O'Connell was on I thought that was cool, talking about like media and like these were like these were the type of conversations that I would want to have at a dinner party, and that's basically what the TV Guide channel became.
I love it.
And
It just
people
goes
are,
to show everybody has
yeah,
different
right.
ways of looking
But
at things.
that's why they're
Everybody wants
afraid to.
different things.
They're afraid to. A lot of cord cutters are afraid to cut cable because they're like, well, how am I going to know what's on TV? They'll say that that's the number one thing is how am I going to know what's on TV? Not like how am I going to get it, but like how am I going to know what's on TV? I don't
Well,
want to miss.
in my wife's case, it wouldn't be so much how am I going to know what's on TV. It's going to be how am I going to find what I want to watch?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. How do you know? Yeah, how are you going to find it? How are you going to know what's even out there, and how are you going? Or more importantly, how is it going to find you? So, like for example,
Well, that's the lazy man's approach to the
well, I'll say it this way: E has a show called E Presents the Red Carpet, and if you subscribe to this, if you DVR it on your thing, you will get the red carpet to almost every single premierable event that happens on television. All the award shows, all the big sports shows, a couple of big movie premieres. But this is just an example of if I want to see red carpet footage, I no longer need to wait for the Tonys to click the button to try to get the Tony red carpet show. E now has a guaranteed proven way for me to get red carpet footage without me needing to go find it. So I might miss a show and I don't even know the Golden Globes was on, blah, blah, blah. But I got the red carpet show because, and I think that the subscription model of television is a big future of where we're going.
There's another piece of that too, which I actually find a little bit confusing. I get it, but I also don't get it because I think Apple was the one who kind of changed the way we talk about it. They don't call it subscribing anymore. They call it following.
Yeah.
And okay, so yeah, I get it. We're following, but now what we're looking for is people who are regular followers? Is that what we're talking about? Is that what we used to call a subscriber, right?
Right. Well, I think because I think a subscription to me sort of infers that I'm gonna get a ping when it's available. Like I'm gonna get notified when it's available, and that's not how. And my understanding of subscription versus follower is that I'm not getting pinged, so I'm not subscribing. I'm just following. I have the ability to know when information is updated because I'm following you, but I'm not subscribed. I'm not getting something back from you that I haven't asked for. And I think that's a difference. Yeah.
I think what confuses me, and this is actually kind of something that broadcast TV would certainly identify with before Nielsen came along, which is how do I know what my audience is responding to here? Because I mean, I know early on, like I started my podcast 10 years ago. When I first started, first of all, I had no followers. And after a while, I had like 2 and 3, it was that kind of a thing. And I would hear from the ones who were following me. And we'd have email exchanges. And, sometimes they'd send something in to talk about on the show, that kind of thing. So I still get that. But now it's gotten to the point where a lot of the people, I mean, I see the numbers of people who are actually tuning in, but I don't know what a lot of them are interested in. I don't know what they're responding to. I mean, I can see this show produced that number, this show produced that number, so I can kind of measure it that way. But that's about the limit to it. And it's almost like we're getting to the point now where we're losing one of the big benefits that I thought existed with podcasts, which is connection between the podcaster and the audience. It's like it's being pushed away from a place that it was at before. And maybe that's just my perception, but I'm curious to know what your take is on that.
I think that we ask a lot of our audience as podcasters. Okay. I think that I have a hard time dedicating an hour to listening to something weekly in a solid sit down. So for me, listening to a podcast that's an hour long would take probably about a week because I'd probably listen to 20, 45 minutes here and there. Have to re-listen to the last 5 minutes, So this linear experience piece, I think we also a lot of people use podcasting for connection. Some of that connection happens here, like you and I, and some of it happens when we're as we're live streaming with the ability, to handle comment and talk. But I think that part of the obstacle is that an hour of content, regardless of if it's a podcast or not, is still an hour of content. Like there's a lot of TV shows we won't watch because it's just like not good, or I don't, we don't like the writing, or it's not entertaining enough, or I'm not going to get it. I don't know what I'm going to get out of it. So many cable networks exist because, and I remember being at MTV when MTV was like, we're just losing male audience. They're just all going to ESPN. We're not even going to do sports. I used to work on like sports and music festival on MTV, and like we weren't even no athlete, no sports at all. Nothing was working. So we watched the guys go to ESPN, then ESPN2, and I watched how sports could work on, a game of softball could work on ESPN, and it wasn't going to work on, on MTV anymore. Even if I had like, Tony Saragusa and like some cool, like, athletes that like were intergenerational and well known. And I think there's and I look at even all the versions of like the DIY DIY and HGTV and TLC and Bravo. They all touch, home decor in their own unique way.
Mm-hmm.
But when you sit down for 30 minutes or 60 minutes, you want to expect to know what you're going to walk away with.
And yet many of the biggest podcasts do exactly that. They do long podcasts. Joe Rogan, he's known for doing like hours long episodes. Yeah. And he's not the only one. A lot of the big ones, they just go on and on. So, where's the line?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's an individual line. His product is so much based on his talent, his innate talent of being a comedian and being a conversationalist. And I think what's really cool about what he did is the long format to prove that it was a sustainable conversation, because up until then we saw him doing comedian spots or hosting, 30-minute shows or 60-minute shows on TV. So, to know that someone like him, who can, apparently talk to anybody, can literally talk to anybody for 2 hours, that becomes something like, oh, I got to see this. I got to see it to believe it. I watched the Leah Remini episode. I'll never forget. And where he goes is unique and different. He's not asking the same questions that Oprah was asking, because he doesn't have network standards breathing down his neck the way that, so he can ask, he can do things with his guests, right? And they're not gimmicky. Like when he's like smoked weed with Elon, like if that was an MTV TRL thing, it would be gimmicky. You know what I mean? It would just be like a hokey kind of like painful creative segment, I would imagine. But he has the ability, and I think also with him specifically in the Wild Wild West, we're seeing what we can get away with in podcasts on a big level. And I think that was kind of exciting to us as podcasters, and then also to people who support the podcast community, like the people who have a podcast that's not their own, but it is created by somebody else, but they have that ownership over, the story and the sentiment behind that podcast. But it's there's no shortage of spaces, no shortage of platforms or surfaces, and there's only going to be more and more. There's going to be.
Oh yeah, we're only scratching the surface. It's just going to, as much as it has mushroomed, it's going to mushroom 10 times over, 100 times over, 1,000 times over.
It'll be fractured. It'll be fractured in the context that it's being delivered to us. It'll be fractured in the audiences that are watching it and consuming it. It'll be fractured in the technology that is delivering it. So there are just so many ways, and you own it.
I know you keep going back to that. I know
you own it. You don't, like, I sold so many TV shows that I don't own anymore. And like, I have a podcast. I got it trademarked. So I got my little like copyright on it, so that I can, registered my R with a little circle on it, so I can globally protect this brand. And then I turn that into a platform to discover podcasters. So if you are out there and you have a podcast and you're looking for a little press friendly nod, come to ihaveapodcast.com/interview, and I'm happy to offer free featured articles for podcasters, independent podcasters. And I also turned it into a TV show. So I took, the last 5 minutes of some of the celebrity interviews that I've done on my podcast with Mandy Moore and Jamie Lynn Sigler and Danielle Fishel, and I'm able to use that at the end of a 30-minute show, the same way that like late night talk shows have, a performance at the end of their show, or they save the sort of the best for last. So I was able to repurpose that into a TV show, created 5 episodes, and now moving forward, I know that I have a 5-minute need in the TV show version that I want to pull from the podcast. So I'm creating segments specifically so I can pull them into my TV show, so that I'm not repurposing content anymore.
That's fabulous. By the way, you saved me something. Normally, I have to say toward the end of the show, by the way, before we part company, you got to give us information about how to reach out. You just told us how to reach out.
Thank you. Yeah,
I have
right.
a podcast. First of all, I love the title. I have a
Thank
podcast.
you.
I
I
mean,
think I
that's
appreciate
great.
that.
That's really
I
cool.
love podcasters. We research and we create and we produce and we publish and we follow up and we promote and we hopefully give credit and we hopefully ask for awards and we share in all that energy. That's like, I don't know. And also we all come from some, regardless of how long you've been podcasting, you did something before.
Yeah.
regardless, even if it's 10, 20, 12, 15, maybe some people, started podcasting apparently in 05, 04s, 03s. I'll give it to them. You did something before. Or after or during, especially in the early 2000s. There's no way they were like making that, they weren't just living out of the gate. Lewis and some of these awesome podcasters that are just like synonymous with the game.
Right.
They struggled, to be honest. They struggled in podcasts. At least, a lot of modern creators now who are just podcasting, we're like, we got to have our careers and be podcasters too. And I hope we bring all of our unique experiences to it, because that's what podcasting needs. It doesn't need more of the same conversation that's out there, but just more unique conversations. My facts to my stories and my characters to my stories don't change, but the story changes depending on who I'm speaking with. And that's important. That's how the story lives on. For me, that's how my story lives on. Not that, in the multiple versions of it, because they're all true.
I love this. This is a great way to wind up the show. And I got to tell you, Vinnie Potestivo, this has been a fabulous, fabulous conversation. I really, really enjoyed this. First of all, because I got the chance to kind of look inside the mind of a man who was actually at the forefront of a lot of this stuff. I mean, he was doing it. You were doing this in broadcast media, so you had a lot of tools at your disposal, but you were also kind of breaking a lot of the roads that are now open to all of us. So you were there kind of at the beginning of it. So thank you for like opening your brain and showing us what was going on behind the scene there in your own mind as you're creating this stuff. That was great.
And that's how it happened.
And that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. Now tell me, what did you see again? What did you?
Yeah, right.
I love it though. And I love that I got to create pop culture when it was consumed by millions and millions of people. That I should be so lucky to have been there to see so many things happen that were televised, that so many of us watched on TV also.
Yeah.
That I get to call back on as a shared experience and say, like, I was there and so were you. And we saw the same thing from two different vantage points. And it doesn't matter who we are, but we can pick up where we left off. I love that ability to draw on what I got to create on MTV and all the places that brought me to. I feel very, very lucky to have and I just watched it. I just literally watched media change. I'm watching it change now. I'm watching it again, which is why I'm investing in podcasting and why I'm going this route. And I'm trying to meet as many podcasters as possible. Not necessarily the top 20, the top 10 in every podcast. I no offense, but like, I already know them. I don't want to podcast. It's a weird thing to say, but like, my goal isn't to get to know them. My goal is to be part of the next wave of stars of podcasters. And I know that what we're doing now is leading to that next wave of podcasters. And with all due respect to the huge people in podcasting that have, defined our industry, I just want to remind you what happened from Facebook's perspective. I want to remind you what happened to MySpace.
Yeah.
And being first, and is not necessarily all that it's meant to be, but these podcasters are moving and thriving and shape shifting with the industry too. So I think there's a couple of them, Joe, Gary, Lewis, like Brene, like there's a couple of people that I can just like first name people that I can say that are ahead of the curve when it comes to what's happening in podcasts. And then there will be a group of them that are not. and
That's the way it
that will
usually
give room
shakes
for
out.
us. Yeah,
There's
that's
always
exactly
some,
it.
there's the others. It's always the
Yeah.
case. Well, thank you once again. This has been
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you for being on the program. Thank you for sharing this time with us. And thank you to my podcast audience. We love you everywhere that you are. And we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.